It's perhaps hard to imagine today, but there are certainly moments in human history when it seems that the kingdom of God is at hand. One such moment is described in the New Testament, in particular in the Acts of the Apostles and the Epistles. Paul burns with missionary enthusiasm as he travels around the ancient world. Those early Christians must have been a very intense people. They were living in an expectation of the second coming of Christ and the end times. Then Christianity becomes the state religion, and the institutionalization of Christianity takes over. In the 1200s, Francis of Assisi comes to reform, to tread in the footsteps of Christ, to preach unity with creation. He sets out to restore the message of Jesus. He says, "Your God is of the flesh. He lives in your neighbor, in the nearest man." His friars go out among the poor and live the gospel. As Francis is reputed to have told them, preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words. In 1647, along comes George Fox, seeking a new intimacy with God and preaching a simple Christianity. Fox, like Francis, was rejecting his comfortable background. The intensity of his charismatic vision, coupled with his genius for organization, leads to the growth of the Religious Society of Friends throughout the 1650s and its consolidation during the rest of the century. Those early Quakers roaming the countryside were also very like those early Christians or those first friars. Quakers felt that existing churches taught the husk, not the vital life at the heart of religion. They believed they had the same presence of God in their lives as the early Christians did. Early Quakerism is Pauline Christianity revived. Jesus had said, "For when 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am here amongst them." Paul says, "Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others weigh what is said. If a revelation is made to someone else sitting nearby, let the first person be silent. For you can all prophesy one by one, so that all may learn and all be encouraged." I am sure that early Christians gathering in private homes were waiting on the Spirit in the same way as we Quakers have done for 350 years. Early friends spoke from a belief that the values of the world were false. Listen to Edward Burrow. "We are not for names, nor men, nor titles of government, nor are we for this party or against the other, but we are for justice and mercy and truth and peace and true freedom, that these may be exalted in our nation." Theirs was the Lamb's War. Isaac Pennington wrote, "Give over thine own willing, give over thine own running, give over thine own desiring to know or be anything, and sink down to the seed which God sows in the heart, and let that grow in thee, and be in thee, and breathe in thee, and act in thee." This mystical injunction to obedience to God, indeed unity with God, reminds us how very biblical and Christian these early Quakers were. Then, Quakers had all the mysticism of the Catholic tradition, together with the outrageous certainty that they could know God directly. As Margaret Fell famously records George Fox preaching in Ulverston in 1652, "You will say, Christ saith this, and the apostles say this, but what canst thou say? And art thou a child of light, and hast walked in the light. And what thou speakest, is it inwardly from God? After the restoration of Charles II in 1660, Quakers retreated into quietism. Robert Barclay and William Penn ensured the theological coherence and continuation of Quakers by maintaining the forms: silent waiting, no clergy, no sacraments. And now this lack of explicit belief talk perhaps means that we can defend ourselves better against the new atheism. But it also means we might be individually lost. In Mark Russ's memorable phrase, we are a pilgrim people without a destination. In 2018, I set out to read a chapter of the Old and New Testaments every day, together with a psalm or a selection of proverbs, until I had reached the end. Everyone has their own path, but I was born again into a Christ-shaped future. I ended up feeling that Quakers needed to remember God, not think they could do very well without. Is it this which could give us a sense of what we are here for, why we are sitting in silence, why Quakers still have a vital purpose as the Christian mystics we surely are or can be? We could be inspiring the busy, noisy practices of our neighbouring faith communities and offering a way back to God for the secular, soulless peoples among whom we live and work. Early Quakers often said, "We preach Christ crucified." Today, I think even more impatiently, could we not preach God incarnated amongst us, the desolating, jolting presence of the light, born every day in our own hearts and in our neighbourhoods? Quakers are fond of saying, "Let your life speak." I have watched with admiration how very many Quakers set up food banks and night shelters, or promote restorative justice, or work quietly for peace in troubled parts of the world. These actions were why I joined the Society more than 20 years ago. But what George Fox wrote from Launceston Jail in 1656 was, "Let your life preach." It's not just about doing good works. We are called to be patterns and examples, just as the apostles were. But the early Quakers would surely consider the role of a friend was to enable God to be manifested through themselves. I take George Fox to be saying, you are the people who have been called to gather everyone into this new experience. I think this is a little more than simply leading an admirable life. Paul tells us in Galatians that I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Letting your life preach is not about your own efforts. It might require letting go of the attempt to be a good person, stepping aside as an ego, and being open to God working through you. In particular, I believe that our silence is a gift, a mystical gift, which we can share with all Christians and others who have different faiths or who are looking for meaning because they have none. I've been to many Christian churches of different denominations. There is much there that we as Quakers lack: the prayer, the singing, the Bible, the sacraments. But there is also much noise, much bustle, much chaos, no silence. The still, small voice of calm, which the Bible talks about and which Quaker worship embodies, is often lacking. I think in that silence we can rediscover hope. Underneath the noise, there is an almost undetectable hum of love. If we can only turn off our phones, put aside our chores, center down, we can feel it together. I think people in this bustling, overwhelming 21st century need to find a mystical unity with the sublime, although they may not know this yet. They don't have to call this God. They can call it inner light, or calm, or mindfulness, or whatever gets them through. They can seek unity with the universe, or nature, or anything they like. But it is all about slowing down, stopping, and letting reality in. I like the thought that life is like living in a house. Your dwelling has different rooms. One might be about issues intellectual. Another is about things emotional. One is about activities physical. And one is about matters spiritual. When you have a house, you don't spend equal time in all the rooms. But I think too many people never go into the room that is about the Spirit. Quakers are here to say, we have a room for you. Come and sit in silence for a while with us. Find hope here. Quakerism is not simply an exercise in mindfulness. We seek to know each other in matters which are eternal. Silence is a way, not a destination. We are waiting on God, not just on the final handshake. And outside our meeting for worship, what to do? I think a good question might be to ask, what would make us, as friends, really unpopular today? As Quakers, it seems to me that we need to be a constant disturbance in society. We need to be a troubling people.